Prices are getting lower. I know YouTubers always tell you you should wait, don't buy now, but it's more true than ever. If you waited, for example, now, I'm seeing prices that I've never seen before across all PC building components. We're not just talking about GPUs. We have to separate something here. Yes, Nvidia is being stubborn with their prices of current generation stuff. I went to my local Microstandard to check out some prices, see what was going on, and I even checked online on like Newegg and Amazon. First of all, they are having more sales now on components than I've ever seen before. That sort of runs a wide selection of different, hardware pieces. For example, I saw laptops with 10% off that are pretty new that just came out. I saw various, cases and things like that are getting cheaper. Nvidia may not be lowering their prices, especially of stuff that's already out there. Like one thing that I was shocked at are the high prices of RTX 3000. I guess this kind of makes sense because Nvidia told us that RTX 3000 was going to go hand in hand with RTX 4000. When we have a new generation release like the, 4070 Ti, 4070, you assume that that's going to be all the new stuff and stuff like the 3070 is gone. But this generation, Nvidia has been running them side by side. I don't think enough people picked up on that. That's why you're going to see a lot of 3060 Ti's and 3070s still very close to the price of the newest stuff. Right when the 4070 came out, I saw 3070s for literally almost $600, which is very, very ridiculous. Even now, most of the 3060 Ti's are still pretty close to what the price of the 4060 Ti will be. Obviously, when that GPU releases in a few days, prices are going to have to come down even further. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. A lot of it I feel is not Nvidia helping to push the price down, but it's actually all of the retailers that are stuck with all of these components. There are just less sales in general, so they're the ones that have to actually run all of these discounts and run all these specials in order to get people incentivized enough to come in or order online to be able to get a lot of these products. Things like a 3060 Ti, it's still crazy to me that they're over $400 in a lot of cases. That's where you expect the new stuff to be at, but then when you look at Nvidia's strategy of running RTX 3000 alongside RTX 4000, it makes complete sense. Obviously, the high-end stuff like the 3090, 3080 Ti, those GPUs were pretty much gone months ago, maybe even a year ago, because those would conflict too much with the current generation. But as the GPUs start to overlap, we're starting to see even more of like 4070s right next to 3070s, still both with fairly high prices, especially the older generation stuff. So interesting to see what's going to happen. If Nvidia and AMD in general are not willing to lower prices on the retail pricing of their products, a lot of retailers are going to start suffering a considerable amount more, and that's going to hurt selection. And at the end of the day, it's going to hurt not only the consumers and gamers, but also the places that we rely on to be able to buy a lot of these products. A lot of times it's not the fault of the retailer that they have something that's highly priced. That's going to come primarily from Nvidia themselves and then distributors and then all the middlemen that are in there in between. So while it's nice to see these sales starting on all of the other components like on power supplies, cases, even laptops, it's still a long way to go because at the end of the day, the most important component of any gaming PC is still going to be the GPU, and that's what's going to be a little bit too overpriced. Coming up, we do have the 4060 Ti 8GB. Now, what are the thoughts on that at $399? Obviously, people do not like at all that it's only 8GB of VRAM and that you have to pay an extra $100 if you want the 16GB of VRAM version. And then it starts to not make that much sense because the 4070 is a much higher performing GPU, but that only has 12. So you start to enter this sort of like gray area where the VRAM is just a little bit too much for that type of GPU. It's understandable why they do 8 or 16 based on the memory configuration. That's really the only option that they have. If they wanted to do 12, they would have to use a GPU much more similar to the 4070, and that may not bode well for pricing. So definitely very weird what's going on with that GPU segmentation. The 8 GB 4060 Ti at $399, I think it's a GPU most gamers likely will want to skip, because remember, while 8 GB of VRAM in some cases will be enough, it's proving not to be enough in many cases. In 1080p and 1440p, you can say these are going to be the most popular resolutions. We don't even have to touch 4K. These two resolutions, starting with 1080p, are already experiencing issues at 8 GB of VRAM, especially when you turn on the textures. And of course, a lot of games are using ray tracing now. You don't even have to go the route of ray tracing. Textures are what makes games look really good, and 8 GB of VRAM is becoming a limitation. What it's going to come down to, if you buy an 8 GB GPU in 2023, yep, you're going to be able to use it in a lot of the newest games, but every time you do, you're going to have to go into the menu. You're likely going to have to tweak settings. It's going to be a lot more work to make sure that the GPU is going to run more or less how you would expect it to. You would assume if you buy a brand new next generation GPU, you don't have to do that much work in fine tuning it, because it should just mostly work at the settings you sort of apply to it, right? But that's not going to be the case. You're going to have to do a lot more thinking just because of the 8 GB of VRAM. We're not even talking about the usual ultra versus high settings. We're talking about fine-tuning smaller individual settings, with textures, with different sort of effects, in order to be able to play the game at the level that you would want to play. While this is something you expect to do on an older GPU to get more life out of it, generally on a new next generation, fairly high-end product at over $400, you would assume you can play at 1080p. That's something you may be more expected to accept if you're running, let's say, the 4060 at $299, because that's a lower price point. 8 GB, you can stomach it a little better, but at $399, that 4060 Ti really is not looking all that great. Even if it does have DLSS and it's going to be, very power efficient, it's still going to prove to be very limited in a lot of scenarios going forward in games that really eat up a lot of VRAM. And then the 16 GB version, that's going to be open for discussion to see if that extra $100 is really going to be worth it. In many cases, it's going to be nice having that 16 GB of VRAM, but remember, it's only 128-bit bandwidth here. We're talking about very limited speed. Even though it does have more L2 cache, which does help the overall bandwidth, you're still going to run into limitations, especially considering the power and performance of a 4060 Ti. 16 GB makes more sense on the 4070 Ti, for example, if they had put it there, and obviously on the 4080 where it is now. So we're going to see what happens. Hopefully, pricing stays much lower than it is now, because that's going to dictate what gamers accept in the performance of these GPUs going forward. It's one thing if these retailers are doing sales and it really helps to, get certain products, but at the end of the day, if the GPU is still way too expensive, and if Nvidia and AMD don't reduce the prices from what these retailers get them at, it's going to be passed along to us, and it's going to continue the sort of cycle of very expensive products. All right, guys, so remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.